Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had a subscriber ask a question, which I'll flip in right here, and he wants to know, will I talk a little bit about acidity versus alkalinity in diets? I have covered this in the past, but it's been a while, so let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing. Let's do a little bit of crafting, and let's talk about this. Alright guys, I want to try to cover this without really offending anyone who maybe believes this or has tried this type of diet. This is a very, very old concept, meaning I have seen a diet book written on this topic that was over 100 years old. Okay, this is not like cutting edge science or anything. This is stuff that people were coming up with possibly as soon as the late 1800s, or it might have been right after the turn of the century back then, around 1900. But I saw a very old book written on this, very, very old stuff. All right, and the whole idea there was about, again, eating foods that are alkaline versus acidic to control the pH level of your blood. Now, I personally like to eat a really acidic diet as a defense mechanism. So if someone ever cuts me, that my acidic blood can melt their blade, and then I can spray them with the arterial spray and blind them so that I can pounce on them and eat my prey. All right, joking aside there, that's the absurdity of it almost. It really is that absurd when you really think about it. The human body is amazingly complex and amazingly good at regulating its own pH. Like your blood, you would actually have to work really, really hard to change the pH balance of your blood. In fact, if it changes significantly at all, you have a major disease and you have a problem, meaning acidity in the blood is usually a sign of extremely dangerous untreated diabetes. All right, and when you think about it from that perspective, it has to reach a point through diabetes, like untreated diabetes, where it becomes acidic enough to be noticeably different, and it's called ketoacidosis. Now think about that. You have to have a major disease go untreated for it to reach a dangerous level, and otherwise the body actually regulates it just fine. It has no problems with this. Again, your body is very, very good at buffering pH and keeping it in a certain range, irrespective of what you eat. Even if you're starving sometimes, it can keep it there. A lot of people are like, you know what though, I tried this type of diet. You know, I went on a mostly alkaline diet and I felt better and had some chronic health problems resolved, so I think you're wrong. You know what? Stop and think about it this way though. Most of these alkaline diets, when you look at what's in these diets, when they start talking about acidity versus alkalinity, you're usually cutting out some of the really fatty meats in your diet, maybe eating a lot less fried food, and you're eating a lot more plants. Now stop and think about that for a minute. The fact that you are replacing certain fatty foods and heavily refined foods in your diet with a lot of plants, with fiber, with phytonutrients, everything else in it, some things that you might have been deficient in. Is it any surprise that you started feeling better eventually or had some chronic diseases clear up a bit? You're eating more salads, you're getting more fruits and vegetables in. If your diet isn't great, who isn't going to improve by throwing in some more fruits and vegetables? Common sense. And people say, but that worked. So it's because the fruit, it's not because they're alkaline though, guys. It has to do with the fact that you took a diet that was full of probably too much really fatty food or processed foods, and you replaced those foods with a lot of vegetables and whole foods that are high in fiber and other things. You probably had a really deficient diet and you replaced it with healthier foods. It has nothing to do with the pH balance of those foods. You know what? Your diet didn't change the pH balance of your blood because your diet isn't going to do that. Now, you could affect the acidity in your stomach a bit. That's going to be affected by what you eat. And in fact, really fatty foods tend to cause your stomach to release more acid. All right, that's normal, but that doesn't affect what happens in the bloodstream. There's a lot of buffers in between there. There's a lot of things going on in your GI tract between there to prevent your blood from becoming acidic from your diet. It can't do it. And ask any medical doctor, ask any registered dietitian. This stuff is complete nonsense to sell diet books and basically just to use to promote veganism sometimes. But you know, veganism isn't completely bad anyways. I don't want people to think that I'm saying that because let's be honest. Eating more whole fruits and vegetables and whole plant foods in your diet is probably a good idea. But it doesn't mean that you need to exclude other stuff. But I mean, I'm going to agree with that. That's a good idea. But you're not going to affect the acidity of your blood with your diet. You're simply not going to unless you are diabetic and not taking your meds. That's when you need to worry about it, okay? And that's totally different. Those people could still eat the same shitty diet that you're worried about causing acidity, who are diabetic, and if they take their medications and everything, they're still probably not going to go into ketoacidosis. It's because they went untreated. it's not necessarily because they ate acidic foods. Even for those people who actually have a problem with it, it's not because the foods in their diet are acidic or not. That doesn't even factor in for those people. Again, this is the examples of the stuff that we talk about of pseudoscience hippie stuff getting mixed in with fitness and nutrition and everything else. You know, guys, that's the reason we study these things. We study this stuff scientifically in the body. We measure these things. Dietetics has come a really, really long way as a form of science. In the last 20 years, actually, I've heard some nutritionists estimate that we probably know, as of the last 20 years in the field of dietetics, that we as the human race, or the people who study that field as their primary expertise, probably know 10 times as much. The top experts today have 10 times the knowledge in their field than they did 20 years ago. That's how far that field has advanced. And so when you're taking really old school stuff that's like 100-year-old ideas, when the science was completely different and they were still learning basic things, and people still do that a lot. They take a lot of this pseudoscience and hippie stuff and they try to turn it into modern science, you know. And guys, that's as bad as the bros with a lot of the bodybuilding and supplement stuff. It's a different type of bro science, and it's not real. It's not based upon things that we can measure and see in the body, but because they talk about a scientific concept, it makes it sound scientific. It makes it sound real. Oh, acidity, alkalinity, that's science. That's why it's called pseudoscience. They just take a catchphrase and they try to take people who don't know anything about this stuff. They don't have a deeper knowledge of biology or sciences or chemistry or anything that goes on in the body, and they try to lure them in with a scientific sounding buzzword, and then it convinces tons of people. And then sometimes people try these things, and because it seems to work, they assume it's because of the thing, instead of just stepping back and realizing maybe there was something else going on. Maybe it's just the fact that you got more fiber and vegetables in your diet that made you feel better. Maybe that's what cleared up your constipation. Maybe that's what helped with your arthritis or whatever problems that you're having. It's not the acidity, though. And people need to be leery of this pseudoscience. You've got to remember, there are a lot of con men in the fitness world and health world and everything else who play on people's ignorance. And you know what? The thing is, sometimes they actually believe their stuff. I mean, you take someone like Food Babe, who spouts all of her nonsense, and she's just like, all registered dietitians and nutrition researchers just shake their head when she speaks. She probably really believes what she's saying, and that's why she's so passionate about it and talks about it nonstop while making her living at it. She probably really believes it, but it doesn't mean that it's true, and it doesn't mean that she's not actually ignorant about what she's talking about. But you have to be aware of these things, particularly when you're talking about things that go on inside the human body. This is not the area you really want to jump into pseudoscience or metaphysics or anything else. This is stuff that you probably should look at what the leading experts are saying, look at their evidence, look at their data, and assess what they're saying, and then at least compare it to these other concepts you're looking at. Make sure that there's not some contradiction there. And here's the thing, and this is when it comes to anything in the body or science, if the top experts in the world are saying something different from what these other pseudoscience people are saying, you need to step back and examine it, because it is possible sometimes that the top experts are wrong. I don't want to appeal to authority here and say that science is perfect, because it isn't. But the question becomes, unless you can find some reason or really good motive why the top experts might be giving bad information or don't understand, you need to step back and go, what are the odds that someone who's dedicated their whole life to studying, researching, who's actually got an advanced PhD in this field, an advanced degree in the field, and researches stuff going on in the human body, what are the odds that they're going to get it wrong? And that someone like Food Babe or Dr. Noon Amin Ra or some yoga instructor, what are the odds statistically that new agey or hippie type person with their pseudoscience that they're spouting is going to have it right and the researcher is going to have it wrong? Is it possible? It is possible. It is actually possible. It could happen. But the odds of it are astronomical, that they're going to get it right and the researcher is going to get it wrong. So stop and think about that when it comes to these things, and look at the sources of these information and be like, well, wait a minute. Where did this idea even come from? This was actually a legitimate doctor came up with this stuff originally, but they didn't understand what we do today. I mean, this was long before we did blood work on people. That was long before we had things like MRIs to see what's going on in the body. Again, we couldn't even do a fasting blood glucose on people back then. just basic things that you can do yourself right now with just a meter you buy yourself. We didn't have the technology or knowledge to even do that stuff back then. You know, he was doing the best he could at the time to come up with solutions. The doctor who originally came up with that. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that also shows that science can be limited. And science was limited back then. It's still limited today. But when people are taking that really antiquated data and knowledge, now that we've looked at it further and had tons of new technology and ways to measure things and analyze stuff and done multivariate analysis on different things, you don't want to take that old data that spawned pseudoscience and nutrition books and diet books and everything else and use that in place of the new information that comes out. And the reality is your diet is not going to significantly affect the pH balance of your blood. And worrying about the acidity versus alkalinity of your foods actually won't even affect the amount of acidity in your GI tract. Your GI tract is so acidic, dramatically acidic compared to anything that you eat. Repeat that again. The GI tract in the human body, your stomach acids are so acidic, so much more acidic than any food that you will possibly eat, that the foods you eat, their own pH balance isn't enough to affect even the acidity in your stomach by more than 0.5% or 1%. All right, their pH balance is totally irrelevant compared to that strong acid that's already present. It's not going to change it really, not noticeably in any way. And your body is already set up to buffer all of that acid coming through your GI tract. It's already set up to do it. Every mammal on Earth can already do it. Nothing new there, guys. So just people need to stop and think about these things and realize that sometimes people with a lot of this hippie stuff that they're coming from areas of pseudoscience that are so old and been outdated that they're not even real concepts anymore. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.